As natural wood species go, redwood is in a class of its own. A sustainable alternative to tropical hardwoods, redwood is grown and harvested to the highest environmental standards in the world. Named for the dark red heartwood at the center of the tree, redwood imparts natural beauty, warmth, and durability to interior and exterior building applications, including decking, fencing, paneling, siding, exposed beams and timbers, pergolas, and other shade structures. To learn more about redwood from Humboldt Sawmill, please visit getredwood.com.
And she picked me up for dinner last night, and I was able to, coax her inside and show off the house a little bit. And she wasn't totally appalled by what I did here. So
that's how I feel anytime I show anyone the house.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Senior Editor Brian Pontalillo.
Hey, everyone.
Fine Homebuilding Contributing Editor and Production Manager for TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwant.
Howdy.
And our new producer, Nate Gruka. Did I say that right, Nate?
You sure did, yep.
All right. Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, folks all heard that Nate is here with us today. Andres, don't worry, he's around. He's on a video shoot this week, and Nate has been kind enough to help us out. Thanks, Nate. Pleasure to have you here. Oh my gosh, ahead of the show, we were talking, Ian, you're having your annual estimating class at the local community college you were talking about. Can you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, so it's with Madison College, which is Madison Technical College, and they have a great program that we hire a lot of our people through. Even some of our longer-term employees at TDS graduated from that program. So it's the Carpentry and Remodeling program, and John Stefani, who's written some for Fine Homebuilding magazine, is the teacher of the estimating class, and they have an estimating 1 and an estimating 2, and this is the first year that I'm going to do a day of teaching at the estimating 1 class. So I'm looking forward to that. I get to talk about burdened labor rates and how you build a good burdened labor rate into your estimating. It's one of my favorite, most exciting topics to talk about. Just in case anyone's listening in the car, I won't go too deep into it so you fall asleep on us. But we're in the after show, we're going to talk about some common questions we get. So I've got a list of common questions that I get from students when I do things with Madison College, whether it's the estimating class or I also speak at the class orientations that they have there as well.
Well, I can't wait to talk about that. And we had other ideas when we were talking before the show started about common questions to Fine Homebuilding and Green Building Advisor, and that you get, Ian, related to any subject, right, Brian?
Yeah, the only, as I mentioned while we were chatting, the only thing that makes me nervous about this after show is that every common question we get, we could talk about for much more time than we have for the after show. So we'll see how many we actually get to discuss. But yes, it's exciting, and there are there are things that are just perennial, whether I don't know. I wonder sometimes what the if the questions are actually so common because so many people encounter the situations, or if they're so common because we have not yet explained them well. We have not yet. They're so complex. Maybe they're so complex, or maybe we're just not smart enough to yet have actually answered them well.
Well, it's an observation that's been made by podcast listeners. In fact, I think a listener was the first to coin the term fine roof venting podcast, and I don't know if that's one word as home building is, but you all get the point. We've
insulating
been
and
described
air
as the fine
sealing.
Air sealing
Definitely
podcast.
not one
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to talk about that. It'll be fun. So I don't know if you all can tell, but I've been doing a little remodeling on my library ladder wall behind me. You can see I've moved my tool chest from next to me, like right here at my desk, to over here, and I had to change the shelving to make it fit. The shelves were about 4 feet wide. The tool cabinet is also about 4 feet wide, so you need a half a foot or more to negotiate it in there. So. Real happy with how that turned out. It seems like the space feels so much bigger without this giant looming thing over me all the time.
Where's the anvil being stored now?
It's
Is
still
it
there.
Still on the top
can you
shelf?
see it? Yeah, you can see it there at the bottom. Yeah. That needs a new home, man. I don't know.
I thought you had a top shelf spot picked out for that. You guys were gonna hump it up 2 ladders and set it up out of the screen above your head.
What I need from listeners is a suggestion on how to build a mobile base that's sturdy enough to actually, have an anvil on it and have it still be useful. I have a concrete floor, so I think it would roll easily, but I don't know. An anvil on casters just seems like an impossibly bad idea. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think you're right.
Well, what are you working on, Brian? You told me you were itching for spring weather, but it seems like we still have weeks or maybe a month or two to go.
Yeah, we have a while to go. I'm excited. I'm gonna finally get back to some home projects this weekend. I just before we started recording, I sent my sister a text and backed out of a family commitment this weekend so that I could actually have 2 full days. And it's not like no one's wedding. I didn't back out of like my sister's wedding or anything. Just
I would not hold that against you either.
Just some social time, and I'm hoping that Amy will take a trip to the lumberyard with me in the morning. And I'm gonna stock up on material, and I'm gonna get started first on the remaining cabinetry and shelving that needs to be built for our house. Which actually, it sounds like a lot. It's actually not. We have a small house. Most of it's done. I mean, if I had 2 weeks, it would all be, to put into it. It would all be done. So it's not a lot of work, but I'm looking forward to getting back into it.
Cabinet building, as we've talked about many times, takes up a lot of room. Are you able to do this inside, or are you going to set up outside to do this work?
No, I'm going to do most of it inside. I might break down the sheet goods outside just to not be making tons of sawdust, more sawdust than I need to in the house. So at least I might set up some sawhorses and bring my tracks out and do the majority of the sheet good breakdown and then I don't have to carry the big sheets of plywood down into the basement too. But otherwise, I'll work down in the basement and build it all. It's not tons of cabinetry. I have half of a mudroom cabinet to finish. I did the bench. I have to do the uppers. I have a bathroom wall cabinet to make, and then one more like a floor to ceiling kitchen cabinet.
I got to ask you, and it's a complex answer, I'm sure, but a lot of folks who listen to the show are going to say, why not buy that stuff and just get on with your life? And why not buy that stuff and just get on with your life? Why do you like to make it?
Well, the reason I made this is an excuse because I probably would have made my kitchen cabinets anyway. But so this is don't believe a thing I'm saying. But the reason that as I talked about on a show a few weeks ago when Ian and I were talking about our kitchens, the reason I made my kitchen cabinets is because I wanted to do them on a really shoestring budget, and I did them for less than I could have bought anything for. So that's my excuse for why I built my kitchen cabinets. But even if I had a budget for really nice veneer plywood and finished face frame material, I probably still would have been building them. It's just fun. I even like screwing boxes together. I think I love the whole process of making cabinetry.
I don't think you're alone. I think a lot of folks who listen to this show, are into finished carpentry, and yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can tell you it's a great bang for the buck. You're going to spend $200-300 on material, I'm guessing, and you're going to have. It doesn't take a lot to spend $1,000 on boxed built cabinets, right?
Right. I actually got to. I had a nice experience last night. I got to show off my house a little bit to Monica Rokicki, who's an architect and building scientist, and she was in town because she's filming our upcoming class on how to improve indoor air quality, and which. Little plug for that. It'll be out in a couple months. The class, and it's like 6 modules, continuing education credits. I think it's going to be really excellent. And she picked me up for dinner last night, and I was able to coax her inside and show off the house a little bit. And she wasn't totally appalled by what I did here. So
that's how I feel anytime I show anyone the house.
Yeah, so it made me feel good that she didn't say much, but she didn't say anything that she wasn't scared away.
That's cool. Well, for what it's worth, I think you did an amazing job given your budget and the constraints of the time you were building and all of it. And gosh, especially since you did it yourself with Amy's and have some help, and Ian, you too. Yeah. You guys did an amazing job with your budget.
Yeah, but to Brian's point, every time you bring another professional into your own home that you built yourself with your family, it's a little bit like, be nice to me, please. Don't go too hard on me here.
Yeah.
Carol's boss was here,
sure.
And Danielle Sherry is a very kind and competent person. But of course, I was anxious to have her looking at my finished carpentry and stuff. Can't let it get out. This comes from Alex. Alex and other listeners who write in with feedback or questions, thank you very much. He says, hey, FHB podcast, I'm hoping you've already received responses for the couple that is trying to find someone to build their house in the D.C. area. I'd like to recommend Simby Homes. I'll put a link to the Simby Homes website on our podcast page. I've met the owners of Simby Homes, and sounds like they would fulfill the needs for this build. They're also active in the DC BS and Beer group, which is how I met them. Thank you for the podcast and for your continuing efforts to provide great programming. I'm glad I can finally provide a potential answer for someone who, after listening for such a long time. Thanks, Alex. I wouldn't want people to know I was listening to this podcast either, but if you are listening and a long-time listener, please feel free to introduce yourself and ask a question or whatever.
What's great? Yeah, what's great about that reader feedback is that it made me think, when we get these questions, which we get a lot about how to find a builder or an architect in your area, with more of these kind of local groups popping up like BS and Beer, where people are going to learn, what a great place to go find a builder or architect, because at a minimum you're finding someone who cares. Yeah. They're wanting to learn, they're wanting to get educated. So what a great place to start looking for someone.
I wholly agree. This comes from Theo near Seattle. Hey, podcast. I listened to the new episode, number 615, when you discussed my question about insulating an unsheathed wall from the inside. Many thanks for your advice. I have some follow-ups. I really like the idea of the U-shaped 30-pound felt idea. So we mentioned to Theo that sometimes it's recommended you cut and fold a piece of 30-pound felt behind siding that doesn't have a sheathing layer, and it acts as a WRB and prevents bulk water from coming into the framing cavity. He says, I really like the idea. I'd put the U in place and then brad nail a thin strip of wood to each side to press the tar paper tight to the studs. This would discourage water from weeping in and do a bit of air sealing. I'll avoid pushing the tar paper / wood strip too tight against the existing siding, but it probably won't get any real air gap. At the bottom of the bay, where any water captured by the U might land on the bottom plate, I'd leave a little coat tail that gets shoved down between the bottom plate and the siding to carry the water further down the exterior, ideally past the bottom plate. Anything you would do differently? What do you guys think?
I would maybe try and make that coat tail out of a separate piece of material. I think he's got the right idea with trying to flash that down, but I think you're going to struggle to get that tar paper in there and kind of bent that way. So I think coming up with some other piece of flashing, whether it's a flashing tape, or I think Core Event might make some different plastic type products that would work then in that situation that you could cut and put in.
That gap
first.
Is going to be impossibly small though, Ian. How you going to get something as thick as Core Event in there?
Well, I think they make different products out of that material that could be used as drainage pieces. I'm thinking you might have to look outside the regular carpentry siding range and maybe look for something that's more of a masonry weep or something along those lines. But I think he's going to struggle to bend the tar paper and get it to really do what he's thinking it's going to do.
Brian, you got thoughts on this?
This is one of those situations where you're doing the best that you can with what you have, right?
Exactly.
So I think I think that I like his idea of using some, just some small pieces of wood to hold the tar paper in place. I think it'll make it nice and easy to install. It'll make it neat, and it'll firmly hold it where it is. I agree with Ian. I think it'd be hard to slide that coattail down there very easily and very far. And I mean, I thought even something rigid that just kind of he slid down there and then lapped behind the tar paper, so that any water kept moving away from the cavity could be useful. And I don't think he needs to worry too much about not having much of a gap. I think just the idea that you're separating the insulation a little bit, and if the tar paper gets a little bit wet and then it does its thing and crinkles a little bit, well, now you've got a drainable house wrap back there.
Yeah.
I can tell you that Theo's analysis of this situation tells me he is the right person to be doing this work, right? This is like...
Yeah.
I've seen Mike Sloggett use PVC trim coil, which is commonly used to wrap beams and posts and stuff, in place of aluminum trim coil. As he uses this as flashing when you need to get something in a very tight space. So that might be worth exploring.
Another way to look at this would be similar to how you would do the subsill on a window install. You might put a clapboard or some other ramped piece of wood on the bottom that would kind of act as your drain to push any water to the outside of the wall. You might look at doing something like that too, since you have it open. Then all you'd have to do is run your U-shaped tar paper down to it and let that ramp do the rest of the work.
The other part of Theo's original question involved he wanted to put a sheathing layer on the interior of a space, and we suggested that the interior was potentially complicating with regard to electrical outlets and openings and this kind of stuff. And if you were doing all this work to do water management on the exterior, did it not make sense to pull off the siding, put on a sheathing layer, and I'm not going to say do it right because that's open to interpretation, but do it more conventionally, let's say. And he says, on the interior-exterior sheathing discussion, I'd like to make a defense of my plan, not to be right, although that is one of my favorite things, but to make sure I'm not missing... I thought the same thing. I'm not missing something in my analysis, which includes some info y'all probably didn't have previously. Okay, so he says the wall is already disassembled pretty much as far as I can go from the inside. It needed other modifications as part of the remodel, so there's no window or door jambs and no electrical work that remains. The exterior siding, while not museum quality, is cedar channel gap and is holding up very well after 50 years. Until anyone tries to remove it, at which point the tongues, or whatever they're called, almost always break off. Replacement siding in this style is around $6 per square foot, which adds up quickly. Roughly $2,000 for the wall in the worst case. The wall is on the second floor, and making the siding replacement a more dangerous operation and or require scaffolding rental. On the other hand, half-inch sheathing is less than $1 a square foot at the local home center, and it seems easy enough to install on the interior that's already bare. The total would be around $300, which is admittedly more expensive than something like Simpson T-bracing. But if you ask the engineer if T-bracing is a good substitute, the build time would probably make up the difference. Yeah, I'm guessing an engineer is going to cost $300 no matter how simple the answer, right? What do you guys think? Does it make sense? Is it going to really improve this structure to add sheathing on the interior? Theo lives in a very mild climate. I don't think it's seismically active in Seattle, but we might get lambasted from listeners telling me I'm wrong.
I think you're wrong. I think that's on the good old Ring of Fire seismically active area. It just might not be the better known of the West Coast seismically active areas, but I'm not sure what an engineer would make you do to a single family home if you've opened it up there.
Agree. I think you'd agree that sheathing would make a building better in a seismic event, right? Yeah.
Sure. But I think you'd also have to be a little bit concerned about what's the perm rating of that dirt cheap home center plywood that you're throwing up on the, or OSB or whatever the sheathing is that you're throwing up on the inside, especially if you are in a wet, mild climate like Seattle. I would be a little bit concerned of what that would do to the rest of your indoor air quality and some other ventilation type issues in the house.
So you're saying no? I'm gonna interpret.
I don't think it's worth it unless you really need it for some type of engineering or reinforcing the wall system.
I was going to tell Theo to go for it if he was really into it. I mean, I can't see a reason not to. Hell bent maybe is an extreme way to describe Theo's intent, but yeah. What do you think, Brian?
I don't know. This is like this is a pretty serious structural question. So that I don't feel qualified to give an answer to. I would like to know whether a reasonable engineer thought that it was necessary to add this kind of shear strength to this building or not, and if it was, and if T-strapping did it, and all you had to do is run a kerf, diagonally through your studs and install some T-strapping, that's the way I'd go.
Just think how easy it would be to hang a picture, though. I mean, you got
true.
plywood everywhere.
Yep.
Heavy pictures.
Yeah.
Theo, I don't think it's going to hurt anything. Ian raises a good point about vapor profile when you're adding layers to walls, especially materials that are, I'm sure, act as a vapor retarder, maybe not a class 2, 3, whatever, but yeah, it's going to slow down vapor movement for sure.
Yeah, and in a building like a wall assembly like this, where it's already like sort of compromised without any sheathing and a good WRB on the outside, you want a wall that can just dry as much as possible. Yeah.
Well, if you all have any thoughts on Theo's wall assembly, I'd be delighted to hear. And if you're angry about me because I messed up the seismic activity of the Seattle area, I apologize. Oh my gosh, this quickly comes from Chris. Hey all, I want to mention Ford offers the Transit EV van, and Ram has announced their cargo EV van as well. The Ram isn't currently available in the US, but its sister model, the Fiat e-Ducato, is available outside the US. So we have a feature on EV charging coming up in Fine Homebuilding in issue 322. And if you all are interested in the subject about charging your vehicles at home, I think you'll find it tells you everything you really need to know, even as down to the devices you might need to do it if you wanted to try it yourself. What'd you think of that, Brian?
Of the EV chargers?
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet.
Well, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to want an electric vehicle. Those of you who wrote in with suggestions on other EV work trucks, please keep the suggestions coming. It's a continually evolving stuff, and although I try to keep up with it in the New York Times, they are probably the worst automotive writers in the country, is what I've observed. So,
yeah, they're right up there with their sports writing too, which I think is why they bought The Athletic and just decided to outsource it.
We have a colleague that works for Wirecutter, Doug Mahoney, who wrote for a couple tool features tests in Fine Homebuilding, and I think their stuff is excellent. But
he did a recent piece on choosing the right screwdriver for your.
Did you see Doug's piece on the screwdriver?
Yeah, good stuff.
I was delighted to be able to say I know that guy.
Yeah, he called out a couple of Rolls-Royce style screwdriver brands, so I was happy that he appreciated the high-end fancy screwdriver.
He was a very good tool tester. I can tell you with great confidence that when he checked out something, he put it through a workout that a real tradesperson would put a tool through, and that is huge benefit to readers, I would say.
Including dropping it from height and using it as
Yeah.
a hammer, no matter what it is.
You can drive a nail with a track saw track if you try hard enough.
If the track's long enough and you really turn back with it.
This comes from our friend Caleb Carpenter of Rad Woodworks. Hey, podcast team. As members of the skilled trades community, what is our obligation to say something when we see something? There's a large home being built behind my house, and over the last few weeks, I've noticed problem after problem, from unsafe practices lifting trusses to reverse laps on house wrap, improper installation of windows, roofing without underlayment. Literally, the list goes on and on. That being said, is it our duty, if we knew better, to say something? I've talked to the GC a few times now, trying to be friendly and ask respectful questions, and every time he has been pretty aggressive towards me and gotten irritated. It keeps me up at night thinking about the future homeowner struggling with problems from their contractor not doing things right. But what should I do? Do I have a talk with a GC? Do I speak to someone with the town? Even talk to the foreman? I want to do the right thing without creating enemies, if at all possible. Any insight from y'all would be greatly appreciated. As always, love the podcast and keep up the great and important work. Caleb Carpenter, Rad Woodworks. Caleb, this is a fantastic question. Who wants to go first?
I knew you guys were just going to look at me. I knew it.
Because I think I know what you're going to say.
I think you know me well enough. I don't think we have an obligation. I can understand the desire to correct other people's incorrect work. I think when you witness something that is blatantly unsafe and dangerous, I think that you could consider that you have an obligation. I wouldn't call it an obligation. I think you would be within your right to report it to either OSHA or your local building authority. But as far as trying to tell somebody that they're doing something incorrectly without the total context of the project, I just don't think that's anyone's place. In his comment about the future homeowner, that future homeowner may have gotten 3 bids from 3 different contractors, and they picked the one that was 1/3 of the median on the bids because that was what they could afford. So you don't have enough context to start picking some of that stuff apart, in my opinion. And I'm not at all surprised that a GC would act aggressively toward anyone who walked onto their job site and started asking questions, especially in the part of the country that Caleb is in the capital region of New York State. Having worked there and known many different contractors, especially large GCs, there is a kind of a personality that some of them have that would lean them toward being aggressive on somebody who came onto their job site without prior notification or without invitation.
Stacks of cash.
Yeah, in a paper bag left somewhere off outside of view. Is that what you expected I was going to say, Patrick?
Yeah, I would think, Ian, that you would say that that's not our job. I always value and respect your opinion, and it's.
But you're going to disagree completely.
I think you're right, but
right.
If it was my sister, I would tell her.
Different.
But yeah,
that's different. We're talking about a situation you know nothing about. I would equate it to if you're on the interstate driving to work and somebody whips by you at 90 miles an hour, do you call the police? I don't know, maybe. They whip by you at 120, swerving all over the road. Do you call the police? Probably, but to me that's still kind of a probably. I can remember a couple of instances being on the Taconic Parkway and having the motorcade for the governor whip by you and on the parkway, and the armada of Chevy Tahoes going really fast. Do you call those in? What is your obligation there? You don't necessarily know the context.
What do you think, Brian?
Well, And I don't think there's a, first of all, I don't think there's a right answer to the question. I think, these are, this is a kind of, because we could take this question, we could apply it to so many, different scenarios in life that have nothing to do with building and have a similar question. So I think it's very personal, and I think it's, each of us are going to decide how to deal with these things in our life in different ways. And, I noticed that in situations like this in my life, sometimes I will go one way and sometimes I'll go another, and I don't even necessarily know why. It's what I'm feeling at the time, and maybe sometimes how well I think I could handle the situation. So for example, walking over onto a job site and telling everything they're doing wrong strikes me as not going to go very well. However, maybe if he had the right person, maybe walking over onto a job site and handing them an article that you printed from Fine Homebuilding and just saying, hey, I just noticed the way those windows are installed, and I just read this article. I think it's really great and might be helpful for your crew. And then, saying nice to meet you and have a great day. Like maybe that would, maybe the person's not going to, change, fix this job, but maybe it changes something in their, the way they work in the future. So, I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to handle this. I also think I would feel different about, I might not storm onto a job site and talk to a contractor, but if I knew the people who were having this house built, if it was a custom home and I knew them or came in contact with them somehow, I probably would talk to them about it. Because then I felt like I had the right, I had like, that would feel maybe it would become a little bit more critical to me once I knew that, had the opportunity with that person. But I'm just not sure. Again, I think it really just depends on so much. And also, like, how's he gonna sleep well tonight? Not saying anything or saying something. And
I think there's different degrees of bad building, right? Like combustion appliances that are done incorrectly or dangerously, that's one thing. If aesthetic problems that don't affect life safety, like who really cares? If the folks are happy with the house and the project, that's really all that matters. But like, bad WRB or water management, boy, that's kind of in between. Like, is it my job to police water management details on construction sites? No, it's not. I think it's a similar question when someone asks you, do you like my car? Of course I do. I love your car. Everything about it. I love the chestnut brown color and the wire wheel covers. That is awesome. It's the best. But you know what I mean? It's
don't forget the Lando top, the matching chestnut Lando top. Or maybe the contradictory white cream Lando top.
I am a sucker
it's hard.
For Corinthian leather. Okay, yeah.
In some ways, a certain amount of this falls into the same category as my distaste for people who trash other people's work on Instagram. When you look at somebody else's work, you don't know the context of it. You're looking at such a small glimpse of it. I understand in this case, Caleb is a talented tradesperson, and he's maybe by virtue of proximity getting a little bit more of it. But I think Brian gave some pretty good advice for how to mentally work your way through this situation.
I would love for listeners, if you have thoughts on this important subject, and I'm sure you do, I hope you'll write to the email box and tell us what you think, because as Brian suggests, everyone is going to answer this question differently, and I would like to hear what you all have to say.
And well, one last thing is just that even if you're not, like, I think this is a reason for people to be involved with the things that they care passionately about, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe it's not right to storm onto a job site and and I keep saying that. I don't want to accuse Caleb of storming anywhere. Like, Caleb's probably a really nice, reasonable guy. But I just, I think that's how people see us coming when we confront them with something that they don't want to hear. But maybe that's the reason, if you care passionately about something, like, that's the reason to send me or Patrick an email and say, hey, I want to write an article about this important thing for Fine Homebuilding. Like, how can we make an impact in a way that without causing, without the potential of, either just not getting anywhere, banging our head against the wall, or creating an unfortunate situation in our neighborhood. How can we improve, in this case, the quality of home building in a way that has an impact? And so, yeah.
It's also a reason to be involved in whatever your municipality's regulatory apparatus for these types of projects is. If you're involved in it and you're a contractor, as Caleb is, what's your level of involvement with your building department? What's your level of involvement with your local OSHA people? Are you going to their training? Do you know the people who are inspectors? Are you out there in the community, just making sure that people know that you're a competent contractor and you do this good work and you're involved with all of the governing bodies for this work?
The great questions we get routinely delight me. So thank you all. It's really cool to have such thoughtful people writing into the podcast. Speaking of which, this comes from Steven in Stuart, Florida. And if y'all are unfamiliar, I looked it up this morning. It's near Jupiter, West Palm Beach area, which is on like halfway on the peninsula on the East Coast side. Greetings, FHB. Great podcast. I watch it on the tube every week. I can't get enough. Attached to the photos are my 10 by 14 lean-to type shed attached to my home. I'd like to convert this space to a conditioned indoor storage room. It's not open to the interior of the house. I plan to insulate the interior with 6 inches of fiberglass bats, close the walls and slash ceiling with LP engineered siding. The conditioning will be created by the cold air exhaust of a heat pump water heater installed within the space. The question is, how do I handle roof venting, or is it necessary? The roof abuts directly to the house. There's no way to install a ridge or screen vents on the upslope. Downslope is open and vent screens will be installed there. Although the water heater can't create the same conditioning as an air conditioning unit, I'm concerned about condensation during our hot Florida summers. Yes, it was 4 hots. Cute little space, right? And Steven's color palette is very typical of the Caribbean style with this amazing turquoise exterior, which I think is really cool. What do you guys think? Is this space conditionable in its present situation? I'll answer no. It needs air sealing first.
Appreciate it.
And it needs some air sealing, Steven. And if you've listened to the podcast for any period of time, you know what we're talking about. If not, you need to fix the holes like I see between the top of the wall and the roof, where the I forget what flashing tape brand that is, but you know what I'm talking about. Did you guys see the holes in the envelope?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What do you guys think of conditioning it with the cold air exhaust from a heat pump water heater?
I'll go. I think it's a little optimistic in southern Florida, right? Yeah, but I think it's totally worth conditioning this space, and it might take very little to make it comfortable because it's small, and if you do a good job air sealing and insulating it, it's going to perform really well. What were you going to say, Brian?
I was just curious, he didn't say what size the space was, but it doesn't look to be very big, right? I don't think
he does. It's 10 by 14.
Oh, 10 by 14. Okay. I mean, I wondered if, I can see 2 sides of it in the photo that he sent. I don't know what's on the other side. I assume a door. I wonder if he could. It's a pretty small space, but and depending on what he's going to use it for, I wondered about putting a window in and adding a window unit air conditioner, a small one, to cool the space instead. And it's a pretty small space in terms of some good airflow. Probably take care of venting. I would think. These are all guesses, but they're all it's an odd space. So if he's not gonna go to great lengths to do this, to connect it to the AC in the house and proper ventilation and all that. Just make sure you have some good airflow. I thought of even just, I wondered if he could connect the space to the house and then just have an exhaust vent. Sort of how you condition a crawl space, right? You just cut one way you can do it is cut registers in the floor and run a very low flow exhaust vent out of the crawl space, and you're just bringing enough conditioned air into that crawl space by drawing it down from the house and out. That thought came to mind, but these were all just sort of first impressions for this unique kind of space.
I like your idea of putting a window in it and using the window AC as a mode of conditioning. I think that's an easy application to execute if you're already willing to take on converting that lean-to into a usable space.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about his original roof venting question? I think we've kind of gotten on a side here, but I want to say a couple things before we move on. But what about the venting question? Is that a concern?
Not of mine, but I'm also not too up on roof venting applications in South Florida.
Right.
It doesn't feel important to me. It doesn't strike me as something worth being concerned about.
So I observed that there's a screw-down metal roof on this little lean-to space, and I wondered if you could actually unscrew this or pull the nails and insulate from the top side, forget the venting altogether, and have a pretty good assembly. That might be more money and effort than is warranted for what Stephen wants to do, but I don't know about Brian's suggestion to connect it to the house, only because I see a lot of pesticides, and that's not surprising given his climate. Roaches and termites and ants are all a big problem in these moist, hot places. So that stuff needs to get stored somewhere else, or we need to keep this outside the building envelope.
That's a good point. Again, like all of these kind of solutions would depend on how he plans to use the space.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure that was not at all helpful, Stephen. So if you want to write back and try again, we'll gladly try and do a better job. But yeah, you got to air seal this space if you want to insulate it. And the siding, that's a cool product, but I don't know how you air seal lap siding if that's what you're planning on using. That stuff also comes in sheets. I think that might be easier, but I think a thing that the podcast relies upon with some regularity is to say it depends. So let's leave it at that. This comes from Jack in Connecticut. Hey, Patrick and co. First time homeowner here. I recently moved from California to just outside Hartford, Connecticut. I became an avid listener to the FHB podcast a few years ago when we were contemplating this move, acknowledging I've only ever lived in a dry western climate and have never been responsible for a house before. There are many future projects on the property, but here is one that has me puzzled. There are photos attached. The back door frame is out of square. It looks like the hinge side of the frame is settled, leaving a half-inch gap at the top of the door on the latch side. The top of the door is level, but the top of the frame and the front of the door both slope toward the hinges. The bottom corner of the door rubs significantly, making it near impossible for anyone else in the family to open, and I can feel a cold draft coming in through the gap at the top. Is there an industry standard DIY fix or something like this, or is this repair best left to the professionals? Does the entire door frame need to be disassembled and rebuilt? I have a strong appreciation for doors that open and close smoothly, but the extent of my experience repairing doors is inserting a toothpick into a stripped screw hole. I believe this is a well-known trick, but I first learned of it on your podcast, probably from Mike Gurton. Thanks for all the wisdom and good humor you share with your listeners. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Cheers, Jack in Connecticut. Well, Jack, welcome to the Nutmeg State. Good to have you here. I wondered where all those folks in California were going. I thought they were going to Austin, Texas, and to Idaho from folks that I know there. But yeah, coming to Connecticut too. What do you think, Brian?
Well, welcome. And Patrick will be over this weekend to fix your door.
Welcome to one of the fewer states that have less personal income tax than California.
Right.
Oh, did you see
I'm
Jack's door?
fascinated by
It's
it.
wonky. Jack has a
Yeah,
I'm
wonky door.
fascinated by the pictures of it, though, Patrick, because when you step back, and I think about how I would approach something like this, and I did a lot of this kind of work when I was in the earlier part of my career. They were easy side jobs to pick up, and once you get good at hanging doors, you can quickly assess issues and fix them. But this one, man, this is wild because you step back and you look at his picture from down the hall, and you see how all of the casings are like perfectly in line on the
Yeah.
top. The door frame is in line with the adjacent ones. The margin is pretty even on each side between the casing and the adjacent wall. It doesn't. It looks a little bit like from the tile that he's got some drop in the floor, but then it doesn't look like it from the outside. So I'm going
Yeah.
to tell Jack, just pick a really nice day, maybe a really nice whole weekend, and rip that door out and see what's going on with your rough opening and reset it. It'd be a really great DIY project. I'm positive Mike Gerton's written dozens of articles that will tell you exactly how to set a door properly, and try to take your casings off in a way that allows you to reinstall them, and just give it a go.
Yeah, it is really fascinating, because if he didn't tell me that the top of the door was level, it would have just looked like, oh, the door is sagging.
Yep.
You know, the top of the door is pulling away from the hinge side of the jamb, and the door is sagging. That's what I would have thought. What's also interesting is that it seems like something must be going on the strike side jamb at the bottom where it connects to the threshold. Like it must have pulled away somehow for that jamb to have moved like that.
Yep.
It looks like it must be lifting up, and if that side of the door is actually, if the lower side of the door is what's rubbing, it must have pushed up and moved in. That's all I can think of. But I agree with you, Ian. Like, you know, if he is a DIY enthusiast, like, doors are you know, they can be challenging, and they can without experience, it can take way longer than it should. But also, if you go slow, and take your time, and, you know, check for level and plumb religiously, check your gap and your reveals religiously as you go on. And I even like to use screws, because I can then back them out, and, you know, because I've installed a lot.
You
of
can
doors,
change
but
your
not
mind, right?
tons. Yeah, so I like to use screws, so I can, you know, if something's not working, I can back them out. And I bet he gets it right by the end of the weekend.
Yeah.
If he starts early on Saturday.
This reminds me a little bit of some advice I was given by an old carpenter who taught me how to hang doors, and he said, level and plumb and square are not nearly as important as does it work.
Yes.
So you want to install this in a way that it works, and don't get too wound up about level and plumb and square. He said in his his email to us, he wants a door that works. So, but there's something in there causing an
Jack,
issue.
I'm going to suggest, and this is just a wild guess, and I'm going to base this on, if you guys look at the reveal on the casing and the jamb, it is very consistent except for the top hinge, where it looks like it's gone from 1/4 of an inch to like maybe 5/8. And I wonder if that jam came loose and that let that door sink. But you'd think the top of the door would be out of level if that were the case. So that's the part that doesn't add up. But I would be tempted to just pull that hinge side casing off and see if that jam is noticeably wonky. If it is
That's a great
separated from the
point,
head
Patrick.
jam.
You don't have to commit to ripping it out, but I would take that hinge side casing off on both the inside and the outside, and clean out whatever insulation there is, and just see if there isn't something that's flexible or just doesn't seem right, or well shimmed or well attached. And to Brian's point, get some long screws from the hardware store that fit your hinges, and once you have that casing off, see if you can pull it back to operable by just using some long screws in the hinges.
Yeah.
Something to keep in mind here is that if that door was cut to fit a wonky opening, it is entirely possible it would read level when it was sagging, right?
Also possible.
Yeah. And I will say that I never had so many problems with exterior doors at the lumberyard that they were always glass. They were always full light, or like this. This is pretending to be divided light, I'm guessing, or it really is. But anyway, they're heavy, super heavy compared to a wood door. So they're always problematic, especially at the top.
Yeah, that could be a non-original equipment door to that frame. That's a good point.
What a great mystery. Don't you guys want to know how this all turns out? I can't wait. Jackson, keep us informed, I'm sure.
I think Jack's got to rip into it and let us know how it goes. You can call Patrick at
I was going to just suggest call Brian.
My cell number out here. You can reach Patrick directly. We'll put that across the bottom of the YouTube feed.
Thanks for listening, Jack. Welcome to Connecticut. I hope you'll keep us posted on your door. And your house is beautiful. I think you chose wisely. Let's see if we can get one more, guys, for the after show. This comes from Nate. Hey, podcast crew. Thank you for the always informative podcast. It's enjoyable to listen to, and I always enjoy hearing the practical perspectives on the very inexact art of building. On episode 602, sorry I'm late to the party, Brian mentioned having an extra mini split installed in his bedroom because of the distribution issues of a single head. We're in the very early stages of planning a build, and this stuck with me since I'd love the efficiency and installation ease of a mini split over a traditional ducted system. Also, in the initial layout of the home, it's a single level ranch, approximately 1,600 square feet. The entire house could be heated and cooled easily with one or two heads. We're planning to install an ERV with a dehumidifier on the supply side. The dehumidifier would be on a dampered bypass like what is described here, and I'll put a link to that for folks who are interested. My question is this: wouldn't the ERV solve the distribution issues of having a single or even just two heads? Comfort's a high priority for me, but also trying to have a cost-effective solution. I'd rather spend the extra dough on a high-end ERV and humidity control, but not if the living room is 74 and the bedrooms are 80 in the middle of summer. Is this reasonable, or am I expecting too much from the ERV? Is a traditional ducted HVAC really the only way to get balanced temperatures throughout the house? And this is coming from someone that has only lived in pre-80s built homes with cool evening breezes even after the doors and windows were closed. So my experience with high-quality systems is limited. Would love to get your thoughts on all this. Thanks, Nate. So Nate is touching on something that I immediately asked Brian about when the first time I saw your house, which is that I had learned you could heat and cool a house about your size with a mini split, one head or two. If you have a two-story house, the upstairs one does most of the cooling. The downstairs one does most of the heating. And you had a real good answer for me, Brian. So I think that's it.
What was my answer?
I don't remember. No. You said that your HVAC tech said the only problems he had with mini splits was distribution. And if you wanted to have closed doors, the only way to keep your bedroom comfortable was to have a head in there.
Yeah, and I had heard that feedback from many projects, like these sort of high performance homes where the loads are so low that people choose to go with one mini split head because it can handle the loads for the house, but again, it's about distribution. So one way to solve that is to do a ducted mini split, and then you're not, you can actually size it right to those load calcs and the sizing calcs, and then induct it throughout the house. And the other way to do it is to install, a zoned ductless system, which is what we decided to do here. I think either can work. Probably, I think the ducted system allows you to probably have a more efficient system. Ian, do you have a ducted system?
No, I have three head mini split system, so I think I have something very similar to yours.
Similar.
One
Do you have one-to-one, Ian, or
or
do you have a multi-split? And
sorry, a
I say
multi-split. So I have one outdoor Mitsubishi Hyperheat, and then three heads on the interior, one on the main floor and one in each of the bedrooms.
Mm-hmm. So that the ducted approach is one way to solve the problem. The other way is the multi-split system. And then, I don't know that and while an ERV keeps air flowing, this is not its intention to distribute air
Correct.
throughout the house. It's to exhaust air from specific places and bring fresh air into specific places. But it's not about circulation. That's not what it's designed for. So that's not. It may help, but that's not. You're not going to design to solve that. Solve that problem.
The one thing I would add to what Brian said is that you have to think about conditioning spaces in the context of what are your extreme temperatures. So I think he's got a home that he's building in zone 3A, if I read that correctly in the notes. So that's the American Southeast. So you do get some very hot, humid weather. I think, Brian, you lived in zone 3A for a while in Charleston, right?
Yeah.
So you have to think about whether or not you can properly cool and dehumidify your house during July and August, or end of August when it's at its most sweltering, both heat and humidity wise. It's why people who've heard me on the show before, I talk about the area that I live in and the area that Patrick and Brian live in. It's one of the most difficult places on earth to build a well-functioning home, because we have -20 and we have 105, dry as a bone, lots of humidity. So we have to build structures and systems that account for both of those.
So the big downside with multi-splits, as I understand it, is turn down ratio. And turn down ratio is when the mini split doesn't need all of its available BTUs for heating or cooling. It slows the compressor down. And when you have multiple heads, at some points there's just so little load that it needs to move refrigerant around. And sometimes that can make spaces too hot or cold. Even when the heads are turned off, it's moving that refrigerant through the system that can have an effect on the air temperature of that room. The better way to do it is 1-to-1. So you got a better turn down ratio. You can use the heads you want, but of course that's more expensive. And some folks don't want 3-4 mini split outdoor units on their house, and they're not attractive in any way. So I get that. So it's a complicated issue. It really is.
We've had a few instances this winter, because it's been so mild, that we've been using the Mitsubishi heads for more of our heat, but we have had issues where on a really warm day, the heads will actually start blowing what feels like cold air. It's not really cold air, but it feels like it because of you're looking for heat when it's winter outside, right? So it has been this like strange feeling of Sarah and I both walking by the one upstairs and going, did you turn the air on? Like what's going on here? But I think it is what you just said. It's that turn down function of the system.
I've said it on the podcast before, and I'll remind listeners, I'm looking for an author to work with on a multi-split or a ducted mini-split feature for Fine Homebuilding, because I think with our low-load houses we're building now, these are both attractive options for heating and cooling, and most folks want both year-round comfortable temperatures. So, it's a way to do that. And, as far as other options, it's affordable and sized correctly, right? Conventional HVAC equipment is largely too big for low-load homes, and it creates its own comfort problems. You guys have anything to add before we part company today?
No, just follow us up on the after show for random questions that we get asked, and we're gonna do them as a speed round. That's what Brian wants to do.
Well, I want to thank you all very much for listening, and as I said earlier, thanks very much for your questions and feedback. It really helps the show quite a bit. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Ian, Brian, and Nate for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thank you very much for listening. Stay tuned for the after show. And if you're an All Access member, thanks very much for your support, allowing us to do the important work of Fine Homebuilding.